Oh, out there, Patriots, I hope you're having an enjoyable day today. Hopefully, you're taking time to uh, to think about those important things that you're grateful for. There's so many things. One of the things I'm grateful for are people like this individual by the name of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I'm sure you just finished reading that story not too long ago, so you're aware of the many great things that this fantastic person from history has done. And so I'm really grateful and thankful for people like Elizabeth who decided to stick up for things that they didn't feel were right. So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about what made her unique and why the author, by the name of Tanya Lee Stone, why she wrote this story. What was her purpose? As you can see here, it says the author's purpose. Why do you think the author wrote a book about Elizabeth Cady Stanton's life? So it's always good to begin there before you start to read on, so that you have an understanding. Why did the author take the time to write this? Just is it entertainment? Is it to teach me something? And as you already know from having read the story, the purpose is to inform us. And then you can come up with your own opinion, because that's what the question says. It says your opinion. Now, if we had the author here with me in my house, then I could ask her and it wouldn't be my opinion, because I would have asked her and she would have told me the reasons. So what I think why she wrote this is that she wanted us to learn that there were important women in history who fought for their rights. That's what I assumed after reading this. So the title of our book is Elizabeth Leads the Way, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and the Right to Vote. So the first thing I want you to do is to summarize the story and then explain why this story is a biography. So if your family member is sitting by the side of you, or if mom's in the kitchen washing dishes, or a little brother's to the side of you, or even your family dog, if you wouldn't mind, just if you have to use some picture clues, I'm going to go ahead and flip the page for you, and this might give you some ideas just to kind of help get you started. If you need some pictures, look at my pictures that I just included on the screen. Go ahead and take a minute. If you need to, stop this recording so that you can sufficiently give your retell, again, starting with beginning, going to middle, and finishing at end. Make sure you're sharing the most important events of the story. Do that right now. Thank you. Okay, for those of you that have been able to do your retell, I'm going to flip back to the other screen because I didn't get to share this information with you. So the nice thing about our Wonders program, every one of our basal reader stories, or those stories from our Wonders books, they tell you what the genre is. That's not genre, that's genre. Genre is a category of books or text. And there's some for fiction, which is a made-up story, and some for nonfiction, which is informational text. That's the books with facts. It's not made up at all. So you can see that this story does have cartoon characters for illustrations. It still makes it a real story. This is a biography, which is a story written by an author that describes events from a real person's life. Typically, it says biographies are stories about the lives of people who make a difference in the world. And so as people are inspired by reading historical books and they think, wow, I am really impressed, I better let other people know about this great person, then they write these biography books so that when you go to the library, you get your hands on it, and then it inspires you to want to do great things just like these people, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton did. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what you've been talking about last week. I believe Mrs. Walton's talked about this, and Mrs. Glazier's talked about point of view, the author's point of view. And so guess what? Today I get to talk about it too. Lucky me. So what is the point of view? So the other teachers have mentioned that the point of view is a type of narration or a storyline that the author uses to let the reader hear or see things that take place in a story. So that's the author's point of view, or the way that the author sees the events in the story taking place through the author's eyes or through the author's ears, the voice that is created. So we have to be aware of that. And then as we read, we need to be looking for evidence that supports the message that the author wants us to understand. So this is a type of main idea, but it's a unique type. So some of the highlights of the story, as you were retelling, starts out when she's just a young little girl and she hears her mother and another family member talking about, oh, it's too bad that the baby's not a boy. Because at this time, this was back in the 1800s, and at that time, women had no rights to vote. It was kind of a man's world, so to speak. And as Elizabeth was getting older, it really bothered her. Her father was a judge, Judge Cady, and she would hear things happening around her where women would come into his office and he was telling them that they would lose their farm and they would lose all of their property once their husband died. And that really was upsetting to her. And as she went to school, she wanted to go to college and she wanted to learn French and math and reading and writing and all these great things and different languages besides French. And her dad noticed that she was a really good student, but just really felt bad that she was a woman because she couldn't really make a difference in the world. And so she told her dad, I wish we could just cut the law out of every book, because her dad says, well, it's the law. That's just the way it is. And she says, well, let's just cut it out of the books. And he says, it's not going to happen. And so at that point, Elizabeth, who was from Seneca Falls, New York, that's the setting of her story, she decided she was going to do things that were typical for men to do. Like she was jumping hurdles, she was rowing in canoes. And then she started to go to these meetings with other women, and they would have discussions about the inequality or how unfair, the unfairness it was. That's one of our words with a prefix and a suffix, the un and the ness, just to review another lesson I taught. So yes, she was busily involved. She didn't waver. She didn't stop for a second. She was so headstrong. Many people called her stubborn, but that was okay because she wanted to make a difference. So she got married and she ended up marrying Henry Stanton. So she took her husband's name, and he was an abolitionist. That means he was against slavery. So they were a good match. They were both against certain things that bothered them that kind of went against the law in the sense that people were created equally. That's what the Declaration of Independence said. So things really started to change when she met with a group of women, and they decided to hold a meeting at a church. And there was only just supposed to be a small group show. There were hundreds of people that showed up, and that's when she read her statement to the group and declared that all men are created equal. And she said after she read her statements, the author said people argued whether or not women should be allowed to vote. So that started the discussion and started making men and women both think, really, should women be allowed to vote? So that's what kind of initiated this. This took place on July the 19th, 1848. And, it took into the 1900s, I believe. I should have checked that, but I'm thinking around 1910, 15, 20-ish. Maybe one of you boys and girls can teach me something today. But yeah, then women could actually vote. So this was the onset of it. And how grateful we are that there were people like Elizabeth that didn't stop. She just continued to spread the good news and the good word. And it spread from Miami all the way to California. So it wasn't just happening in New York where she lived, which is up north, but the word traveled quickly down to the Florida area. And this is California. So that's where it all was sent. So I want you to stop and think now for a minute about what is the author's point of view about Elizabeth Cady Stanton. What is her point of view? After sharing all of these facts with you, what did she want you to learn from this? Think about that for a minute. Okay, so one of the things we need to know is that Elizabeth probably loved saying the word preposterous. That means That is not fair. That is ridiculous. Preposterous means ridiculous. So I thought that was perfect to have her right here. Some terminology that we need to be aware of, like with the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and these great leaders that were against that were fighting for their civil rights. They believed in civic action. That's where we are good citizens and we demonstrate civility, or what's called politeness, with others. That's where we cooperate and we volunteer our time and our efforts for a cause. So that's what both you and me and everyone around us should be doing as citizens of the United States of America. We need to act as good citizens, and we need to always express our civil rights, which is equality for one another, not judging people's religions, race, and all those kind of things is part of our civil rights. And that's the civic action that we as good citizens should show as members of the United States of America. Okay, so having said that, we know that Elizabeth did just that. She wasn't irate. She wasn't violent with her words. Words are powerful. And so she was very polite, but very matter of fact. And she got volunteers on board, people to cooperate. And so from one person, it magnified to hundreds and then thousands of people. And then they finally said, you know what? We need to change this amendment. This is not right. It needs to be changed, and it did. And today, guess what? I get to vote. Your mom gets to vote. Your aunts get to vote. Your grandmas get to vote, all because of people like this wonderful person, Elizabeth. Okay, now we're going to talk about what was the author's point of view. So I have to take my supporting details that I read from the text to come up with what I think is the author's point of view. Okay, so first detail is Elizabeth did not waver. She would tell people it was preposterous if she wanted to. She didn't care what they thought. She knew voting was the only way to make a difference. She gave a battle cry. That's her battle cry. Preposterous. So I think the author's point of view is that Elizabeth is determined and confident. Nothing stopped her. She was a little go-getter. Okay, another details that led up to my author's point of view of Elizabeth Changed America Forever were these details that women joined Elizabeth in battle. She wasn't alone. She made ripples across the country, which we saw in our last slide, that the word traveled from New York all the way south to Florida and then all the way west to California. So yes, her ripples did travel across the country, and she truly was unstoppable. So based off of these details, I feel like the author's point of view is that Elizabeth changed America forever. And I'm a recipient because of Elizabeth. That means I'm a benefactor, or I get to benefit from the hard work of this great lady, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Okay, final question. So how can you be a good citizen? What I'd like you to do is to write down 5 sentences explaining how you can be a good citizen, and then you can read your sentence to a family member. That's my dog Kiki saying, hello, have a great day, and good luck writing your 5 sentences. See you later. Until next time. Bye-bye.